Right.
Can I say Chuck?
You could, yeah.
Okay. You ready?
Yeah. Hello, Gregor.
Hello, Santiago.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here in Barcelona.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah. So, I remember the first time I contacted you, you told me that, yes, you were very interested to come to Barcelona because there was something of a mystic experience that you had.
Yes.
In Catalonia. Can you tell me
yes.
a little bit about it?
And so, when I was young, this was in my late teens, I was more or less a hippie hitchhiking through Europe. And I got stranded in Cadaques. And there was an island from which you could actually see Salvatore Dali's house. And he was still alive back then, so sometimes he was in his 80s. You could sometimes see him sit in his garden, so I have quite fond memories. And so on this island, there was a tax fugitive who had lived on that island and built some sort of palazzo there. Mm-hmm. And he had to leave, he ran away, and that island fell into disrepair. And there was sort of something like a medieval tower, and with a flat roof, and I was lying on this roof and basically had some form of divine revelation where I suddenly saw an infinite being in the sky which sustained, projected forth, and absorbed the totality of all parallel universes and all beings. And that happened right here, just basically on the doorsteps of Barcelona. And it must have been like maybe 1979 or thereabouts. It's a really long time ago, but I've never forgot that.
Right. And was it something like out of the blue? Because I know that in the workshop that you did, you named, quote, Gopi with the Kundalini experience. Were you working with sadhana?
Yes, I did. So I was doing, fasting. I was doing meditation and I was doing isolation, so I was spending a lot of time alone by myself. So yes, I was doing sadhana, yeah. And seeing that you mentioned Gopi Krishna, people are always, or tend to say that he had a spontaneous awakening. He didn't. Right. He said about himself that he sat in Padmasana for 17 years, every day for 1 to 2 hours. He focused on the crown chakra, and he said he didn't have a lot of capabilities in his life, but he was really good at concentrating. Right. So if somebody can do that 1 or 2 hours every day, sit in Padmasana and focus exclusively on crown chakra, that's an advanced spiritual practitioner. And please note, only after 17 years of doing that every day, his Kundalini went up. We can expect after 17 years that Kundalini goes up. Yeah, that's not a spontaneous awakening.
It's been a long time I've read that book. Just when I started practicing yoga. Some sort of like he had an experience that he didn't really understood.
Yes.
And he went to work, and by meditating he understood what it was about.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah. Beautiful. And the first time I've heard of you is because somehow I don't remember I came across your first book. I've been talking to many people after so many other books have been published, and they still consider like the peak of all of the ones of the primary series. And I want to have a little bit of your take about your own evolution with the Ashtanga Vinyasa system as the asana. Through time, through your body, how has it adapted for, let's say, injuries or through time?
Mm-hmm. I didn't have a lot of injuries in my whole Ashtanga life. I had some pretty bad injuries through things that happened outside, like I had a motorcycle accident and I damaged one knee through gardening, landscaping, carrying heavy rocks. I damaged another knee through furniture carrying, and I hurt a shoulder doing a really heavy, huge student in backflips, and somersaults. I hurt a shoulder, but apart from that, in the actual asana practice, it happened very few times that I hurt myself. And part of that was that I have quite a hard body. Yeah, if you have a very soft body that is not very stable, see, the harder your body is, the more stable you are, and the harder you have to work for flexibility. Right. But you, with a body like that, you're going to be better off in the long term. Whereas people who start with a very, very soft body usually go too much into extreme flexibility, and they're going to run into trouble later on because they don't develop enough strength. Yeah. The other thing was, I never hesitated to adjust the practice if I needed to. Right. Yeah. Let's say, for example, every time when I hurt my knees or shoulder, I developed a therapeutic practice that helped me to recover faster. And as I was recovering, I gradually returned to the classical format. Yeah. And this is, I still stick relatively close to the classical format today. You know, I'm 60 years old, but I'm still doing it. So for me personally, the Ashtanga Vinyasa practice is the most powerful physical practice ever conceived.
Yeah, I read that quotation from your book, yeah. Why hasn't there been books written about the third series?
Look, I started writing a book on it, yeah, and I was probably, I can't quite remember, I still have the manuscript, I can't quite remember, I haven't looked at it in 10 years. Right. Whether I'm 25% through or 40% through, I can't quite remember. The reason why I stopped writing it is because after my intermediate series book, I felt that I had put enough emphasis on asana, and I wanted to go exploring other aspects of yoga. Yeah, and I felt also a bit like there is in yoga a huge preoccupation with the body, and I felt that I would be nurturing that if I wrote yet another book on asana.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going back a little bit to the conversation you had with Anvise and talking about pratyahara and dharana. I know that the Yoga Sutra, when they talk about asana, it's in a different aspect. But you have 3 sutras about the asana.
Yes, Sthira Sukham Asanam, Prayatna Shaitya Ananta Samapatibhyam, and Dvandva Anabhigata.
Yeah. So, well, the first one is really well known, and the 2 other ones are not that well known. But the second one of those 3, talking about Ananta, I mean, it's some sort of going beyond or going through some kind of path that is far away in the Yoga Sutra, but it's embedded there somehow. And then you have the duality where you are not caught in the duality. So could it be that it's encapsulated in those 3, or at least the 2 second ones, what is about to happen later on? You will never reach dhyana, or...
I think that the meaning of those 3 sutras is that they describe the outcome of asana. Yeah, in fact, all of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, when he talks about limbs, he doesn't describe how to do them, but he describes what is the outcome when you've described them properly. And sometimes people think that he doesn't really want us to practice asana the way how we do it. He just wants us to sit straight. But look at what he says about dharana, or what he says about pranayama, or what he says about pratyahara. It's as cryptic as what he says about asana. He doesn't say that there is heaps of different techniques that you have to do, which there obviously are. Right. Yeah. But he says, if you do these techniques right, this is the outcome. This is how you can check it. Yeah. And sort of, when he talks about asana, he says, okay, there is dual qualities. You know, you can't, for example, just make yourself more and more flexible. Yeah. Sthira Sukham means, to the degree to which you develop flexibility, you have to support it with strength. Yeah? The same is also, don't develop strength which is not combined with a degree of flexibility.
Right.
Yeah?
What you were talking about right now.
Yeah. And so then in the next one he says that if the posture is done properly, meditation on the infinite must occur.
Yeah, that was the thing I was touching upon.
Yes, so, you know, if you look at that, there must be an inner point of arriving. yeah, and not always a striving to get better and better and better. Yeah, so in the, or let's say one thing to express it would be, he says, and the effort to perform the practice must attain a quality of emptiness or effortlessness. Yeah, so there is a paradox in there. Yeah, that of course you must have a certain passion to perform the asanas, but at the same time this passion must have a quality of emptiness. And exactly that is described in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna says, I don't want you to cease effort and action. I don't want you to be active in the world and fight for what is wrong, but I want you to be process-oriented and not outcome-oriented. Yeah? So the problem is, with modern people, they always think that yoga is about getting somewhere because reaching a goal. Yeah? But it's about doing the actual practice.
So in our sadhana, we should be more care about the process.
The process, exactly. We should be process-oriented.
Yeah.
And then when you go to Tato Dvandva Anabhigataha, with that he means, thus there is no assault from the pair of opposites. So what that means is, you have to be careful about concepts such as doing a posture right or wrong, yeah, and also about, stiff bad, flexible good, and also about, let's say, you often see people do unfortunate things in asana. A typical example would be to just try to get your chin down in Paschimottanasana, just to give you an example, whereas he says, you have to be free from the assault of the opposites. Yeah, it's like, what is happening in an asana is that you perform a certain action and you perform the opposing action at the same time.
Right.
To give you an example, in Paschimottanasana, I'm lifting my heart forward towards the big toes, at the same time extending out through my sit bones backwards. In Paschimottanasana, I'm extending out through the bases of my toes forward, at the same time I'm drawing the shoulder blades towards the hips.
Right.
Yeah? So in other words, you are embracing all of the opposites yourself already, then the world mustn't come from the outside to stop you. Yeah? So now another way of expressing it is in an asana, you are reaching out in diametrically opposed directions. You try to expand into all directions simultaneously.
Right. Okay. Now that you named the Bhagavad Gita, and very interesting, you talk a lot about the Ramayana, which I haven't read, but I know that it's like a compound that has to be read together with the Bhagavad Gita. But taking the Bhagavad Gita in the context of the Mahabharata and even the
Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavata Purana?
No, the little one at the very end of the Mahabharata, there is another one,
Yes.
Puna. That's what I've read from the Mahabharata. It was a synthesis, so I couldn't go into that Bhagavad Gita. But why is that not that well known? Because it's a very important part of the spiritual teachings, and it's a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, which could enhance the value of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the only text that is so well studied.
Well, it's certainly a good idea. Like, when I read the Gita first, I didn't understand it at all.
Right.
Yeah, and once I had read the entirety of the Mahabharata, and I would suggest don't take a 250-page edition. I would read maybe a 1,000-page edition. The whole thing is 4,000 pages. That's difficult to read a lot. But if you read a 900, there's a good Kamala Subramaniam 950-page edition. It's easy to read, it's quite thrilling, but it's very, very in-depth at the same time. So and that gave me the opportunity to also, from that, I managed to understand the whole of the Gita then.
Right.
So I think it's a good idea to read the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. I've read the 1,000 interpretations,
Yes.
but still you don't have that thing. But still, as like the Gita is like the pearl inside of the oyster. But that second Gita or second Bhagavad, because the conversation between Arjuna, it's not that well known as the Gita, which I found a bit.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of passages in the Mahabharata which are really, really worth studying.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that
Fantastic
relation between
compendium.
Arjuna is supposedly we in our search,
Yes.
but Yudhishthira also, because he represents dharma. I mean, you were talking about the Swadharma, and
Yes.
he somehow found that Swadharma. He didn't have the problems or the troubles that Arjuna had.
No.
So he could also be an inspiration for us.
Yes.
In the southern.
Yeah. So, yes, of course, the Gita deals only with Arjuna, but actually, really, the main figure in the entirety of the Mahabharata is actually Yudhishthira. Yeah. And so you can say that the reason why the Mahabharata is so important is because it is a dharma shastra. Yeah. That is a scripture relating to right action. Yeah. And so one of the ideas of the Mahabharata is that to find out what right action is difficult even for God. It's actually not that easy. Yeah. There's a beautiful. So Yudhishthira is the son of a human female and the lord of dharma. Yeah, he's a half god basically. Right. And the sole reason why Yudhishthira has been conceived is to inquire into what right action is. Right. Yeah, so the Mahabharata would be the quest of a semi-divine human to finally formulate for everybody what dharma really is. Right. Yeah? And so there's a beautiful section in the Mahabharata where the Pandavas, the good guys, and all of the people who fight for them realize they're going to lose the war, and the bad guys, the Kauravas, going to win. And the reason why they're going to win is because the commander-in-chief of the bad guys, Drona, who so happens to be the martial arts guru of the Pandava princes, is just too good at what he does, that is marshalling his armies. He's just too good. Right. So they realize that they have to knock him off, they have to kill him. Yeah? Now the problem is, Drona is an immortal. Yeah? Unless he basically gives up, he can't be killed. Right. Yeah? He must agree to him being killed. So they hatch a plot. Yeah? They say, okay, we can't lose the war because then good will lose the war and evil will win, so we have to kill this guy.
Which is Krishna's purpose in a way.
Yes. So they hatch this plot that they say, okay, like the sole purpose of Drona's life is his son Ashvatthama, which is also an immortal. Yeah. So what we have to say is we have to all on the battlefield scream, Ashvatthama has been killed. Yeah. And then he will say, oh my God, is it true? Yeah. And then he will turn to the only person on the whole battlefield that cannot speak a lie, right, because they are the son of the Lord of Dharma, right action, that is Yudhishthira. Yeah? And at that point, you, Yudhishthira, will actually say, it's true, he's dead. Yeah? And Yudhishthira says, yes. No, wait, because I'm the son of Dharma, I cannot speak a lie. Yeah? And then they say to him, hey, do you understand? You have to sacrifice that purity for the greater good. Right. Yeah, because otherwise we can't kill Drona. We can't kill Drona. He will vanquish the good armies, and then darkness will take over the world. Yeah, and he says, no, sorry, I can't. Yeah, and so in the end they call God Krishna, and he has to convince Yudhishthira to speak a lie. Yeah, and so they're sitting the whole night long together, and Krishna talks him through, and he said, no, what is higher than your purity is your duty. Yes. Yeah, your duty. You have to do your duty. We have to win this war. And then in the end, in the morning dawn, he says, okay, I'm going to do it. So they'll say Ashvatthama is dead. Drona comes over and says, is it true? And Yudhishthira says yes. And then Drona sits down in dejection. And then Drishtadumna, that's a guy who has only been born and bred to kill Drona, comes from behind, strangles him to death. But what also happens is that Yudhishthira, because he's so pure, yeah, because he's the son of the Lord of Dharma, he's the only person in this whole war whose chariot hovers 1 meter above the ground and doesn't touch the dirt. Yeah? In the moment in which he says, yes, it's true, and the action switches to Drona, bang, his chariot comes down and he rides through the dirt.
Right.
Yeah, and so this is a powerful metaphor. This is sort of like shows that there is nobody that gets out here without getting their feet dirty.
Yeah, that was his conundrum. And what happened is that Bhishma killed an elephant, so he couldn't lie, but he knew that he wasn't lying because it wasn't Drona's son in a way. Good.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, he knew that it was a lie.
Yeah.
It was a wild lie still. Okay, beautiful. Gregor, looking forward to see you next year, see you in Barcelona, and keep on learning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Santiago.
Thank you.